we'll get started just for the sake of time, since there is a lot that we'd like to cover today. What we're going to do is give you an introduction to the Neptis Geoweb. It's a wonderful mapping tool. It's free, which is really nice. There's no login required, so you can just start right away with your students, which is really nice. A lot of the comments that we've received from teachers is that it takes about 15 or 20 minutes sometimes to log your class into traditional GIS systems. So the Neptis Geoweb is really nice and easy because you don't have to worry about a login. Okay, I think we'll get started. If you have any questions, you're welcome to type into the chat box. So if you go to more, there should be 3 dots above it, and you click on that, you can open up the chat box and we can chat together. So feel free to ask your questions throughout our conversation. We'll also have a question and answer period at the end. All right, great. So it looks like we have a few more people with us today. That's wonderful. Thanks again for joining us, and guess we'll get started. Just a little bit of background about me, first of all, I should mention is I used to be a teacher, and I really loved school and education so much that I decided to go back to school, did my master's in geography, and I looked at land use policies, and I actually did some work with GIS as well, so I'm a little bit familiar with this, and hopefully you can use some of the material that we talked about today in your classrooms. All right. All right, now, just a quick overview of our presentation today. We'll talk a little bit about EcoSpark and the Neptis Foundation, and we're very lucky that we have Marcy Birchfield with us today from the Neptis Foundation, so she'll speak for a couple of minutes as well. We're also going to talk about the Neptis Geoweb, and today's presentation is very hands-on. I'm actually going to have you try out the Neptis Geoweb yourself online, and we'll go through some of those features together. I'll also give you quite a lot of classroom activities that you can use the Neptis Geoweb in your classroom for. And we'll have a question and answer period at the end, as well as an online evaluation of the webinar, so you can let us know any feedback that you have for us. All right. Okay, so really quickly in the chat box, maybe just let us know what town or city you're from and which province or state if you're from another province. And have you tried using the Neptis Geoweb before? And the reason I ask is because I've done quite a few workshops, so you might have heard about this webinar from one of the workshops that I did. So let us know, have you heard about or have you tried using the Neptis Geoweb before? And tell us what city or town you're from. I'm from Toronto, well, originally from Richmond Hill, now I live in Toronto in Ontario. And I use the Neptis Geoweb quite often in a lot of my presentations that I do with students. So Jennifer said she's from Toronto and she hasn't used it before, so that's great. Hopefully you can learn some new ideas, Jennifer. Wonderful. Okay. Greg's from Markham. Victoria's from Burlington. Yes, in one of our seminars. That's fantastic. Thank you, Victoria. I'm glad that you're joining us again today and that you've used it in the seminar, so that's great. Okay, someone's from Toronto and hasn't used it yet. Okay, that's wonderful. Hopefully you can learn a little bit about it. Toronto, not very much. Burlington, haven't used it before. That's great. Thank you for joining, everyone. Hopefully you can pick up some ideas that you can use in your classroom today. I'm going to try and go through some of this material a little bit quickly because there is a lot of material that I'd like to cover today. So a little bit about EcoSpark's mission. We're an environmental nonprofit, and so we're a charity, and what we do is we run a lot of professional development workshops for teachers and students, and the goal is that we can teach teachers to teach students, and students can eventually become scientists and stewards, and eventually advocates for the environment. All right, we also have a program called Changing Currents. This is one of our most popular programs. It's a lot of fun. It's very science-based, where an EcoSpark staff member will actually go with you and your students into a local stream, and you can put on hip waders, which are always a lot of fun, and you can look at the water quality in your local stream and community. So that's a really nice, fun, hands-on program that we offer. We also offer quite a lot of Nature Academy programs, and these have to do with specific concepts. And again, we run workshops for teachers, and we often give you a teacher resource guide, kind of like this one right here. This is for the geography of the Greenbelt. And it has a lot of lesson plans too, so you can incorporate some of those ideas into your classrooms. Okay, and part of the Complete Communities program that we're running right now, we receive funding from the Growth Plan Implementation Fund from the provincial government, and what I do is I run a lot of workshops for students and teachers, and we can actually go into classrooms and do a co-teaching where I guess, teach some of these concepts with a teacher who's attended a workshop or a webinar. And we're running webinars as you're joining us right now. This is our third webinar, and the final webinar is next week, and that's on Monday, and we're actually co-hosting that with Green Teacher. So the registration form is a little bit different for that, but hopefully you can join us for that one as well. It's on March 5th from 7:30 to 8:30, and it's focused on building complete communities for the future. Now, I'd like to introduce Marcy Birchfield. She's the Executive Director of the Neptis Foundation. She's going to talk a little bit and tell us a bit about the Neptis Foundation as well as the Neptis Geoweb. So okay, so just give me 1 second.
I think you unmuted me.
Oh, okay, there you go. Hi, Marcy, welcome.
Well, thanks, Kathleen. I appreciate it. Do you want to hit the next slide? It's just about
sure.
Who we are. So thanks for attending this. This is great. We're really excited to, get this tool out there to more and more people. And we're a small charity, that was started in 1999. And so really what you see on the Geoweb is pretty much the result of sort of 20 years worth of research in land use, transportation, and environmental planning in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And then add a bit more in terms of some of the census information that we've added to the Geoweb that you'll see today. But really, I just wanted to sort of say hello and thanks for attending. And we, this is a tool that we would like to continue development on. And so by development, I mean adding new features to it, adding new data sets, and new and novel ways to use the information and to get that information out there. So we're really open to ideas from those people who are using it, particularly the teaching sector. And so, yeah, please, you'll see there's a little dialogue button on the Neptis Geoweb that says feedback, and you can provide your feedback there, or you can email me or folks at EcoSpark to let us know your comments about how useful it is to you and what you might like to see it on it in the future. And so really it's a mapping and information platform, a web application, as my developers tell me. And the beauty of that is that, as Kathleen said, there's really no software that's needed to download it. All you really need is a browser. The Chrome browser works the best for the Neptis Geoweb software. And really that's all you need to start working on it. It works, I would say, best on a computer, a desktop computer, a laptop computer, but it can be used on a tablet, and if you're in a pinch, on the phone as well, but it really wasn't made for a phone. So it contains information on land use, transportation, agriculture, environment. You'll see layers from the green belt, layers from the Oak Ridges Moraine, and it's really allows you to get a deep dive into land use planning in the region, but also gives you that kind of overview of how the region's going to grow in the coming years. So I'll stop there, and I'm hoping kind of at the end, if people want to stay on, that we can show you some new features that we're actually adding to the Geoweb in April.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marcy, for telling us a little bit about that. And as Marcy mentioned, you're absolutely welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation, and then she'll stick around at the end. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask her as well, or even just hang on for a couple extra minutes at the end of the webinar, Marcy will go through and show us some of the new features, which are really quite useful for classrooms too. Now, we actually had, I think, Rhiannon raised her hand, so I'm just going to unmute her for just a second. But thank you very much, Marcy. It's wonderful that you're here with us today. And just 1 second, I'm just going to unmute Rhiannon. 1 minute. It just takes a second to find everyone's name. Okay. All right, sorry, just 1 second. Takes a minute sometimes. This is our first time really trying to unmute people so that they can speak. Oh, Rhiannon said she's okay. Okay, all right. Well, if you have a question, you're always welcome to type it in the chat box, and we'll try and answer that a little bit later on. Okay, so moving on. The Neptis Geoweb is great because it's free, which is really nice. There's no memberships that you have to pay for. And it focuses on the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which is really nice because that's the area that we live in. And if you attended our first webinar, we talked quite a lot about the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It's this area, if you see in the map here, it's kind of shaped like a U horseshoe shape. So we'll be able to talk about that today. All right, and there's quite a lot of features in the Neptis Geoweb. I hope that we have time to go through most of them today, if not all. It does take a little bit of time to kind of find them all, and there's a lot of different things that we can do with it. And I hope that you take the time after this webinar to go through and explore them, either on your own or in your classrooms. So these are some of the features that we'll look at: the map, layers, context, even the base map. We'll go through a profiles section where it highlights specific municipalities. Topics, as well as map stories. And sorry, so I'm just gonna make sure that everyone's muted again, just 1 second. Okay, all right, thanks for bearing with me while I figure out the technical issues here. Okay, now, so what we're gonna do is I'm actually going to, right now I'm sharing my screen with you, but I'm actually going to go online, and what I'd like everyone to do is perhaps minimize my screen and type in www.neptisgeoweb.org. So you can minimize my screen that you're viewing right now and type in www.neptisgeoweb.org. So I'm actually going to just minimize my own screen here, and I already have it pulled up. But you can see here, if you look at my my background, you can see the Neptis Geoweb, and it's www.neptisgeoweb.org. So excellent, thank you. And Joyce Chow is our executive director at EcoSpark, and she's actually provided the website right there in the chat box. So what you can do in the is you can just click on that, and that will take you to the website. You might have a little box that pops up that says, do you agree? And just check yes, I agree. And then you should have a page that looks like this. So when you've reached this page in the group chat, maybe just say I've reached the page or something, or maybe you just say yes. Just type yes that you've reached this page so that we know that you're following along. Good to go. Wonderful. Excellent. That's great, David. Excellent. Victoria said yes. LSD stop. LSD top. Yep. Excellent. Good, everyone. Jennifer. Excellent. That's great. Thank you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk you through some of the features. And if you have any questions or challenges, just type them in the chat box. It might either be myself or Joyce or even Marcy that might answer your question. So Rhiannon said, I can't open the web browser using the Zoom software. You might have to minimize my screen. Oh yeah, so what might happen as well is if you have Windows 10, it might not let you have both open, so you might have to swipe my image and just listen to the audio, and then from there open a new browser. Yeah, again, if you have issues, maybe try opening a new browser. Chrome would probably work best for this. And what I'd encourage you to do is actually follow along with me. So it's a really fun tool. I'd suggest following along so that we can go through some of the key features together. And then from there, you can play around with it a little bit more on your own. Yes, and thank you, Greg. Yeah, you can just kind of swipe away if you're using Windows 10, and then just listen to the audio, hopefully. All right, so right now you should see a map, and it pretty much, it always starts in the map mode. Right here, if you can see my mouth, it starts in map mode. And there are quite a few tabs along the side. There's layers, context, and base map. It always starts in layers, and we're going to leave it there for right now. And if you look along the left side, you should see land use, agriculture and environment, transportation, and map stories. We're actually going to get started with land use. So you can click on land use for me, and a little drop-down menu should appear that says settlement areas, employment lands, urbanized areas. It shows you a series of different types of land use. And this is a really great tool to show your students if you're talking about land use in your geography classes. What I'm going to do right now, for example, is I'm going to click on urbanized areas at the bottom there. And another drop-down menu should open up. So I've clicked on urbanized areas. And I always think it's really interesting if we look at the development and urbanization that's happened within our Greater Golden Horseshoe area. And I'm just going to make sure that everyone's muted. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on historical urban expansion. And I'm going to turn on that, and sometimes it might take a minute or so. It's just the first time when you're loading it. And what it does is it opens up a series of different years, different decades. And I can actually click on these to add development that's taken place within the different decades. This is really great to do with students to show development that's occurred over time. So if I click on 1971 under historical urban expansion, I can see the development that's taken place in 1971. And I can go through and click on each decade. So 1981, you can see development that's occurred in 1991. Again, you can see that expansion in the area. 2001, you can see further development that's occurred within the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And 2011. So you can see the development that's taken place. And it kind of shows up within those, within the map in different colors of gray. And if I click on urbanized area 2016, just above that historical urban expansion, I can see all the development that's taken place pretty much up until now. So up until 2016. And that's really wonderful because you can show students the development that's taken place within your own community and when it's occurred. And you can also zoom right into your community and look at your municipality. You can find your town, you can find your school even. And these are really unique things that you can show students, and it's great if you can make it personalized to your community. Students really, you know, they want to find their schools, they want to find their home and issues that they know about. So that's a really fun option. What I'm going to do now is I just would like to draw your attention. There are a whole bunch of other features too you can look at under land use. So if you look at settlement areas right above, there's employment land. There's a whole bunch of different features that you can look at. For example, future settlement. That's a really unique one to show students, so you can actually turn on where future settlement is expected to occur and where it's allowed to occur within this Greater Golden Horseshoe area. For example, designated greenfield area. If I turn on that layer, it might just take a second to show up, but it should show up as purple. And those are all the areas that are currently greenfield space that aren't developed, but is an area that could potentially be developed in the future for urban growth. So again, we want to focus more on infill development, building within existing urban areas. But if we do need to expand, these are some areas that are designated to have growth in the future. So you can talk about that with your students. And now I'm actually going to minimize that part, and I'm going to scroll down in my left column here. And I'm going to look at agriculture and environment. So I'm going to click on agriculture and environment. And I hope that everyone's following along with me. Can legend be moved over to the states area? You know, I can exit my legend right now. I don't think that I can drag it and move it just yet. That's a great question. I don't think I can drag it and move it, but I can just minimize it for right now so you can see a little bit more. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and look at agriculture and environment. So if you're talking about different types of land use with your students, this is a really great tool to show that, particularly if you're talking about conservation plans or some of the protective legislation in the area. So what I can do is I can click on Greenbelt, and that will have, again, a drop-down menu, and I'm going to just click on Greenbelt, though, and it will show us where the Greenbelt is within the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And if you've attended our previous webinars, we've talked a little bit about the Greenbelt in this area, how it's designed to protect agriculture as well as natural spaces, forested areas, things like that. You can also look at specific Greenbelt components too. So if you wanted to look at the Oak Ridges Moraine, for example, or the Niagara Escarpment, you can do that using this feature. And you can talk about those in your classrooms too. The other thing I always like showing students is prime agricultural land. Prime agricultural land is really unique to show students because it's a great way of talking about land use conflicts. And so you can, talk about how this is really the prime or best agricultural land that we have here, and it's very nutrient dense soil, and it's really important to protect. And you can look at areas that are currently protected by the Greenbelt plan and by other land use plans in the area, but you can look at where future urban development is supposed to take place, and maybe some of the land use conflicts, things that don't necessarily support each other in land use. All right, just to keep going down a little bit and show you some of the other unique features of the Neptis Geoweb. Another feature that's really great is to talk about Pits and quarries. Now, a lot of the geography curriculum talks about natural resources, and one way that you can do that is to talk about pits and quarries. And if I look under, it's still under agriculture and environment, but you click on pits and quarries and you might have to zoom into the area. So for example, pits and quarries has just come on. I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit. I want to see where some of those pits and quarries are located. I can just zoom in and you can look at your community. You can talk again a lot about the land use conflicts. So you can talk about how, where are pits and quarries located? Are they, within your community? Are they in surrounding communities? You can talk about land use conflicts such as, pits and quarries being located in agricultural land or in the greenbelt. And, these land uses might not necessarily support each other. For example, the greenbelt is supposed to be protected land, but the pits and quarries, does it really support, greenbelt protection? So you can talk about some of these issues in your classroom a little bit. Now what I'd like to show you is, now is everyone keeping up with me so far? Just type yes if you're following along. I want to make sure I'm not losing anyone along the way. Yes, okay, great, excellent. Thank you, yes, good. Okay, perfect, great, I'm glad to hear so far. Okay, now what I'm going to show you is if I want to entirely clear my map, I want to start from scratch, start totally fresh. What I can do is I can actually click on the Neptis Geoweb symbol on the very top left. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I encourage you to do the same. Oh, excellent, Rihanna, David, wonderful. Glad to hear you're following along. So click on the Neptis Geoweb symbol on the top left corner, and that will clear your map entirely. Might take a second. I should warn you, I also have quite a few boxes open, so mine might be a little bit slower than yours right now. But it has totally refreshed my screen, my map, so I have an entirely fresh Neptis Geoweb that I can start from scratch with. What I'm going to do now is just show you another really quick feature. So you can click on transportation. We're still under the layers section. Click on transportation. There's a whole bunch of different transportation options you can turn on. You can look at for example, buses, you can look at light rail. It also shows you transportation that's under construction and that's planned for the future, as well as proposed development and proposed transportation lines, which is really unique. So you can pose these questions to your students. How will this affect our community? You can talk about the benefits and the costs and how that, again, might pan out throughout the entire Greater Golden Horseshoe area. So these are some things that you can turn on. I'll show you that in a little bit later. I would like to keep moving on just for the sake of time. What I'd like to do is now encourage you to go to context. So if you can go to context, it should be just under layers. So it goes layers, context, base map. Click on context for me. And I'd like to show you some of the other data that's available. And you can see under context population. This is a really great topic to talk about with your students. You can see population 2011. You can look at population changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on population 2011. And it shows me using a dot density map where the population is located, where the the population distribution of the Greater Golden Horseshoe. That's really unique because, again, you can zoom into your local community. You can talk about where are the most people living, why is this the case, and all kinds of things that you can talk about with your students. Another unique feature is to talk about population change. So if I actually click population change just underneath, it can show you how the population has changed. And it blue represents gains, red represents losses, and you can zoom into your community and look at where the population has grown and where it has decreased. So these are some of the things that you can talk about with your students. And we also have quite a few lesson plans available on the EcoSpark website. So it's ecospark.ca/complete-communities, and you can download quite a few lesson plans that we have related to the Neptis Geoweb. There's one that talks about population, and you can definitely modify it. So it may say, grade 12 geography lesson plan, but you can adjust that for other classes as well. It also shows transportation and travel and commuting patterns within the Greater Golden Horseshoe area. There's quite a lot of features that you can examine, and I'll let you kind of look at some of those on your own just for the sake of time. But there's employment data as well, so you can see where the jobs are, where people are working. and you can explore that with your students too. And thank you, Joyce Chow, again, is our executive director, and she's posted the link to the EcoSpark website. So if you want to download our lesson plans, you can absolutely do those. And there's one that relates to population using the Neptis Geoweb. And another really great feature that I'd like to mention too is right now I'm currently in context, but I can go down to base map, and I want to change the background image that I have on my map right now. And I can click on base. So under base map, which is below context, you can click on base. Currently, I'm in terrain. So the view that you have is terrain, and it always starts in terrain. But what I want to do for this case is look at satellite hybrid. So I'm going to click on satellite hybrid in the very left under base, and that will change the map that I have. That will change the image on my screen. It makes it almost something more like you might have seen on Google Maps, for example. And that way you can see some of the land use. You can zoom in again, look at your community, and it just changes the map, the base map that's on the bottom. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to actually go through and go back to layers. And just as an example, as an activity, what I'd like to do is go back up to agriculture and environment. Wonderful, and Mercy's giving us some additional information. The icon next to each layer provides a short overview of the information. So thanks again, Mercy, for including that. So if you see a little eye, for example, you can hover your mouse over that and it provides you some additional information too about that. So you're welcome to do that as well. What I'm gonna do just for the sake of this is, if you're following me, I've clicked back into agriculture and environment. What I wanna do is I wanna look at prime agricultural land. I wanna impose that onto my map. So I'm going to click on prime agricultural land, and I can see it's come through and where that's located. But it's a very dark yellow. What I want to do is actually change that so it's not as dark. And what I can do is I can adjust the saturation. Saturation is just the strength of color. So what I'm going to do is I can click on, there's a little circle that you see underneath prime agricultural land. It's almost like a drag bar. And so I can click on the circle and drag it to my left, and that will adjust the saturation, that will reduce the saturation. So if you're watching my image, you can see that I've made it so that prime agricultural land isn't as dark as it was before, but I can still tell those areas that are prime agricultural land. So this is just another feature that you can do with your students. And you can, obviously try it on your own and play around with it a little bit more. Now what I'm gonna do is I want to get rid of my population data, but I don't want to clear my map. So what I'm going to do is within my legend, I can actually click the X and on the population change, and that will get rid of that data. You can also click the X here too. So within your legend, you can hover your mouse over the X and just push the X and it will clear that for you. So right now I have prime agricultural land. I'm going to make it a little bit more dense. And let's see, I maybe want to, just for this example, throw on some greenbelt components. I always like looking at those. So I'm going to put on the greenbelt components. If I click on the larger icon up at the top, it will put on all of those components. If I just clicked on the Oak Ridges Moraine, for example, it would just show me the Oak Ridges Moraine. And again, you can adjust those if you'd like. So maybe I want to make them a little bit less dark in color. So you can adjust those and adjust the saturation if you want, and create any kind of map that you like. But what I'm going to do now is, just as an example, I want to show you another feature that I can do. And bear with me, I'm having to move around some of my icons that I have open just so that I can see my screen a bit more. Okay, now I hope that if you're looking at your own screen, within the Neptis Geoweb, there are some features along the right side. There's a plus and minus symbol and a search, so you can zoom in to a specific community. You can click the plus to zoom in, minus to zoom out. You can also search within, if you look at the, kind of looks like a magnifying glass, you can search for a specific municipality and it will zoom you right to that area. There's another couple of features that I'd like to show you too. For example, let's see, measure area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on measure area. It should look like a bar graph on the far right. So I'm going to click on that. And what it allows me to do is I can actually almost create a polygon. So I can click a couple of times within my map to create an image. And I can use that to measure the amount of land in that area. So what I'm going to do is really roughly, and I suggest if you're actually having your students do this, zoom in a little bit more to try it. But I'm just going to do it very roughly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click. So I've clicked on my bar graph. I'm now going to click really quickly just across some of the land use, and I'm going to outline this municipality here. Again, I'm just doing it really quickly. I'm going to go all the way up here. So I'm just clicking with my mouse to try and look at some of the land use. And I'm sorry, I think I might cut off the top a little bit, but I'm just trying to show you as an example. Just clicking my mouse to look at some of these. And what I'm going to do, so now I've clicked the image that I wanted. I want to end this, so I want to finish my polygon that I've drawn. And the way that I can do that is I can click on my initial point. So click on your first point, and that will allow you to kind of close the image. And then a box should appear that says Analyze. And if you have that Analyze box, that should allow you to, you're just going to click on the Analyze, and it will tell you some of the different types of land use, and it will measure that area for you. And what I'd maybe suggest is actually just looking at my screen now. It might be easier if you're having trouble following along. So you can just look at my screen, and I'll go through some of the features for you, and you can explore those on your own. But what I've done is I use that little feature to analyze the amount of land, and I can see how much land that I've highlighted is prime agricultural land, how much is countryside, Oak Ridges Moraine. So you can click on all these different areas and find out a little bit more information about it, and it will tell you the specific hectares. Now I'm going to discard my analysis for now, but if I have this map, I can do a couple other things with it. I can mark up the map. So if you're following me or looking at my page, I've just hovered my mouse over top of the pen. Looks like a pen, so you can click on that and it says mark up the map. And what I can do is another drop-down menu will appear, and I can actually click on some of these and these options. So I can add a title if I wanted. So this is Durham region, for example, and I can add that title. We have a question from Victoria. Can you do the same with polygons looking at the population layer? The population, yes, I believe that you can. Yeah, I think that you can. And the other great thing is you can always kind of explore on your own and find things too. One thing I've noticed about the Geoweb when I go into classrooms that's really great is students, you know, they always find new things to explore and to figure out. And they're actually the ones teaching me sometimes too. So that's really great because they're always kind of experts about this. All right, so what I've done is I created a, oh good, Victoria, good, I hope I was able to help you there. So I created a, like a bit of text for this map, Durham region, for example. I can drag that, or I can zoom in and I can look right at Durham. The other thing is you can place a marker. So if I wanted to place a marker, if there was a feature that your students are looking at, for example, a land use conflict, the Pickering Airport lands, for example, was a topic that's really interesting to talk about with students. And you know, you can kind of make your own map. And what you can have your students do is they can actually share this map with you. So if you look right in between the little measure area and right in between the mark up the map, there should be a share option. And you can click on share. And what you can actually do with this is you can create a link to this map. So students can actually create a link to this map, and you can copy the link, and this will allow you to go back and later access that same map. So students can email you this map that they've created. They can email you the link. They can, if they're writing an assignment, they can have a little write-up in Word. They can maybe take a screenshot of the map. They can also share this link with you. So they can include this link within their Word document, and you as a teacher can later go in and click on that link, and you will come to the exact same map that the students have made. That's really great because, again, you can see exactly what students are talking about. And if you happen to make additional changes to that map, so say students are working on a project together, and you create a new link, it will, and you share it again, it will create a new link, so you can actually share a new map. And sorry, I noticed that there's a bit of conversation going on. So Marcy has very kindly filled in some information for us. The current analysis tool only calculates area, but we will be building new tool that will sum census data, census area values. So thank you, Marcy. It's great having you here with us to answer these questions. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a whole new feature, but I just want to make sure that everyone's following along so far. So if you could just type yes in the chat box, just let me know. Are you following along okay so far? Just type yes. So David's still here. Yes, great, excellent. Wonderful, Victoria, yes, excellent, great. Good, just wanted to make sure I'm not losing anyone. Okay, now what I'd like to do as well is go through some of the other features. Now, right now we've been in maps so far, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to move over to profiles. And if you look at my mouse right now, I'm hovering over profiles. You can just follow my screen for now. It might be a bit easier. But click on profiles for me. And it will show you a bunch of information related to specific municipalities. And this is great for students. You can do a lot of comparisons between your municipality, a larger city, and then maybe a smaller town, and you can see kind of how they differ. But what you can do is within the search option at the top beside the magnifying glass, you can search for your municipality. You can look at lower tier or single tier. You can look at upper tier. So if you wanted to look at all of Durham region or all of York region, that would be under the upper or single tier municipalities. If you wanted to look at the lower, you might look at specifically at City of Oshawa or maybe the town of Halton Hills. You can customize it and look for your own community too. So that's a really unique feature. As I mentioned, students love looking at their own communities. So what we might do is you can look at your own if you're interested. I might type in, for example, let's see, I'm going to type in town of Halton Hills, and I'm just saying that because I was doing some work there recently, so it's kind of on the top of my mind, but you can look at your own community too. What you can do is it will show you a little bit about where the community is, Halton Hills, and then you can see where it is in relation to the Greenbelt. What you can do is actually scroll down, and there's a lot of information here. So you can look at the population in 2011, you can look at employment, urbanized areas in hectares. There's this wonderful map here on land use. And this is really great for students because I'll do it in a minute. I'm not going to do it right now, but you can click on this map and it will take you to the actual map within the Geoweb, that map system that we were in before. And that's really great because, again, you can look at all the different land uses specifically in your community. So that's really unique for students to do. We'll do that in just a minute. I'm just going to keep scrolling down, and so you can see different amounts of land, the hectares that are urbanized area, future urban expansion that can grow, prime agricultural land within the municipality that you're looking at. Again, this is really nice to bring it in that local example into your classrooms. There's a whole lot of information related to demographics as well. You can see the number of residents here. You can also look at the population change throughout time, so the population in 2001, in 2011, and then even what's expected to be in 2031. So that's a really unique feature too that you can talk about with your students. You can also compare these demographics to other municipalities. So a really unique idea is to look at smaller areas and then, smaller towns and then maybe larger as well, to kind of create that change. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of scrolling through and looking at some of the age. You can look again at the demographics. You can look at the percentage of the population that are immigrants. You can also look at low income as well. So that's another unique feature. And you can also look at the economy, and this is great for comparing the economy. If you want to, talk about jobs that are in your community, you can also compare it to, again, larger communities and smaller as well, to see how they differ. So retail, for example, or manufacturing jobs, financial and business jobs. These are other really great ideas to talk about with your students. There's also transportation too. So this is really unique because you can compare transportation in various communities such as Halton or Toronto, and you can see how they differ. Active transportation versus automobiles, for example. And you can also look to see where people are commuting. You can also go through and look at housing too and see what percentage of your community is detached housing versus semis or towns and apartment buildings. So it shows you a lot of variation too. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm just gonna go through a bit more. What I'd like to do is just kind of briefly show you a couple other features. So there's also topics. If you're following along with me, you can click on topics, and that should be just beside profiles. So you can click on topics. And this is where there's quite a lot of papers related to development, land use policies, and your students can look at these if you want a bit more background information and things. The other feature I'd like to show you is map stories. So you can click on map stories for me, and that should be just beside topics on the far right. And this will show you a series of map stories. And if you look at all these little pinned yellow dots, these are all different map stories that are available on the Neptis Geoweb. Okay, so there's quite a lot of different map stories here. What you can do is you can click on a specific story. You can also search for a story. So if you're following along with my screen, there's a whole bunch of stories here that you can look at, and you can click on one as well. So for example, I'm just going to click on this one here. This is about urban gardening in Pickering. So I can click on that map story, and it will show me a little bit of information. Now I hope that everyone can still hear me. Okay, good. All right, and it will bring up, so if you clicked on a map story, it will show you a map. And this is a great opportunity for students as well. Even if you do have the ability to post it online on the Neptis Geoweb website right here, but even if you don't want to do that, what you can do with your students is you can have them talk about a land use issue or something that's happening in your community, whether it's positive or something that's negative as well. And students can create their own map story. And you can have them create a map. Oh, sorry, I think I might have gone a bit too far. So they can create a map. Sorry, it's just taking a second to load on my computer. You can also look at, they can write a story that talks a little bit about it. So this is a story about urban garden in Pickering. And then there can be a photo that's attached with it as well. There's a couple of tags too. What students can do is they can write about a land use issue and actually create a map. And then you as a teacher can, go in and actually click that map and view that one. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back to profiles again for 1 minute. So I hope everyone's following me okay. So I've gone back to profiles. Unmute. Hello, sorry about that. I hope that everyone can hear me. Just 1 second. I hope that it's working. I'm going to share my screen one more time. Hello, I hope that, can everyone hear me? Sorry, I'm just going to, give me 1 second. Okay, good. It's better now. So is it working now? Okay, great. Thanks for your patience. Sorry about that. I must have too many boxes open. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you some of the screenshots that I have of the Neptis Geoweb. So I'm going to just go through and show you some of these tools. Just give me 1 second. Thanks. If you're joining us again, or if you've lost us, just click on the link again one more time. All right, so just give me 1 second. I'm just trying to bring up the chat box again. Thanks for your patience. Sorry about that. Must have too many things open. Okay, so does everyone have the presentation? Everything's working again? I can just type yes to make sure that it's working. So can everyone view my presentation again? You can just type yes in the box so I know that you can see and hear me. So is the presentation working? Oh, great, perfect, thanks, Marcy. Okay, sorry if I lost anyone there. I must have too many screens open. I'll just go through my own slides now. So we talked about the measuring the area. Just give me 1 second. We talked about map stories, And again, another great example is talk about figuring airport lands and that land use conflict. Now there's another feature, timelines at the very bottom. And if you look back on the map, I'd suggest just sticking with my screen for now so that we don't lose each other again. But if you look at your map, there should be a series of almost like blue diamonds at the very bottom, and those show different legislation that's taken place and when it's come into effect. So that's a really another unique issue. And if you actually click on that, for example, the 2005 Greenbelt Act, it will take you to the piece of legislation from the government. So it's a really unique feature. You don't have to search for it yourself. You can just click on that yourself. All right, so I think that we've gone through most of the features. And now I wanted to talk really briefly about a couple of classroom ideas. So you can talk about land use in your community. You can turn on some of those different land use layers. You can talk about prime agricultural land. And you can also talk a lot about land use conflicts, as I mentioned earlier. So if you're looking, for example, at prime agricultural land in Greenbelt, as well as settlement areas, you can talk about where future settlement might take place and how there's land use conflict. For example, a lot of that future settlement is taking place in prime agricultural land. So you can see where the prime agricultural land is and where that future development might take place over top of agricultural land. You can talk about some of the conflicts that causes. Another classroom activity is to talk about land use in general. So you can discuss some of the conservation plans. You can talk about the role that stakeholders have played in order to help create some of this legislation. You can have debates with your students where your students take on particular perspectives of stakeholders, and you can use this to show some of that land use legislation. Another idea, as I mentioned earlier, is to talk about natural resources. This is really popular with a lot of students. You can look at pits and quarries and aggregate resources that are taken from pits and quarries in your community. And you can look at aggregate resources or things like sand, gravel, limestone. And these are used to build roads and schools, and they're often right within our own communities or in surrounding communities within agricultural land or the green belt. So what you can do is you can look at where they are within your community and maybe some of the conflicts that this causes. Another idea is to talk about watershed health. So you can look at surface water quality. We discuss that. I'm creating a lesson plan right now about that. You can also look at forest conditions. So all these are under the natural resources that you can talk about with your students. And those are available in the agriculture and environment section of the map. And as I mentioned, you can change the saturation of color too, and the base map. So if you want to do that, you're welcome to do that, and you can look at the different types of land use and how that affects them. All right, okay, and another classroom activity, again, as I mentioned, is to talk about population growth. And you can look at how this relates to land use in your own community, as well as the larger Greater Golden Horseshoe as a whole. And you can talk about land use conflicts, like the Greenbelt, for example, and whether it's effective at protecting these areas from urban development and from population growth, as well as prime agricultural land. And there's a lot of issues that you can talk about with your students there, as well as population change, which we discussed a little bit. Another idea is that you can have your students actually look at transportation within your community and within the Greater Golden Horseshoe as a whole. So you can have students look at how their parents commute within the Greater Golden Horseshoe, how they commute to work in the mornings. You can have students trace their route from point A to point B, how they get around if they had to within this area, and they can use the Neptis Geoweb to look at that. I'm also creating lesson plans related to this. So later on in a couple weeks, if you go onto the EcoSpark website, you should be able to find the new lesson plans. You can also talk about ways that students can reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by using public transportation, for example. These are some examples that you can do with your students to look at transportation in your community. Another option is to compare transportation between communities. Under the profile section that we talked about, you can look at transportation, for example, in the city of Toronto. There's automobiles are about 1%, and quite a lot of transportation is public transportation, or transit here. And then you can compare that to communities such as Halton Hills, for example, and see how those differ. You can also look at the regional municipalities, so the So larger, the upper tier municipality as a whole. And you can look at land use. And I didn't get a chance to show you, but if you look at this image, you can actually click into the land use and kind of zoom in and see that map for yourself. In the profiles, again, you can look at comparing different types of demographic information. And I'm creating lesson plans related to this, so you can look for those online soon. I'd also like to mention that the Neptis Foundation is adding new data related to demographics. So there will be new data available about immigration, about languages spoken, for example, the top 10 languages in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, population data as well. So these are some really unique features, and I suggest checking out the Neptis Geoweb now, but also continuing to check it out because there might be new data added as time goes on. Create a chart to compare some of the data between different municipalities. Compare the economy as well, where jobs are in your community, and again compare different communities, and different types of housing, which we also mentioned. So David has a question: what about data on Native communities or demographics? Great, thanks. Great question, David. So I believe that the Neptis Foundation will be adding additional data about languages spoken for Indigenous communities and for Aboriginal languages. So I think that some languages might be added. It might not be a very high percentage of the Greater Golden Horseshoe area as a whole, but I think that they are working to add a little bit of information about that. So thank you, David. That's a great question. Okay, and you can also, there's a comparison feature under the profiles too, so you can compare population growth, for example, and where the highest population growth is. For example, looks like Brampton here. All right, and we also talked about map stories as well. And if your students are creating a map story, I'd probably recommend that they do so, and maybe send it to you as a teacher privately, and they can send you the link to the map that they created, and they can, add a photo and a little bit of a write-up talking about the land use issue. And you as a teacher can add it. We recommend typically that teachers would add the information in the Neptis Geoweb, but that's just because there's kind of a Twitter account associated with that, but you're absolutely welcome to post your student stories. We actually encourage that. That's a great way to share a little bit about our communities, and it's really great for students to see their own ideas in their own community on the Neptis Geoweb too. And it looks like Marcy said that we will be adding Aboriginal languages in the map in April, so that's great. Thank you, Marcy. Neptis Geoweb. Okay, so what I'd like to do really quickly is in the chat box, let us know what features seem really interesting or useful to you when you're using the Neptis Geoweb. So you can just type in the chat box, what features seem really interesting or unique to you? So you can just type in the chat box. Often people talk about the population data because it does relate to a lot of communities, a lot of classes. So let us know what seems really interesting on the Neptis Geoweb that you can use either in your own classrooms or in your life. So you can just type your answers. So where development is going to take place. Oh, absolutely, Greg. I think you're right. Where development is going to take place is a great tool. It shows future development, and that's great because we can see where development has occurred so far, but it's really useful to see where it might occur in the future too. So that's a great feature. Victoria said using the Analyze tool. Oh, perfect. Wonderful. I hope that you can use that with your students. It's a really unique feature, and you can kind of bring in a whole bunch of different topics as well. You can talk about math and measuring that way. So it's really spans a lot of curriculum subject areas. Val said transportation and type of housing. Absolutely, transportation is a big one, and we'll have quite a few lesson plans about that. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Housing is really unique too, again, especially if you're comparing different types of housing. You can have students go outside and actually look at their communities. Does this represent what you know about your community so far? Okay, and I'm just going to continue on for a minute here. All right. And so what I'd like to encourage you to do is just think about how you can use the Neptis Geoweb in your own classroom going forward. Now, I'd like to mention again that we do have a teacher resource guide available. It talks a little bit about sustainable development, building complete communities in this Greater Golden Horseshoe area. And you're welcome to download this for free online. It is available in French as well, and the website's right there on our slide. You can also, we can mail you a copy for participating live today if we have your mailing address. We'll send those out after the webinars take place. And Lizette said, I like the profiles, very quick and easy to use, very visual. Excellent, Lizette, you're absolutely right. And I'm currently creating a lesson plan that does talk about comparing communities using the profiles, so it's a great tool. And David said, I like the numerical analysis of the profiles tab. Numbers can really be helpful to tell a story. I think you're absolutely right about that. Really does help, and visuals are a great example. And you can talk a lot about math as well in your classes, so you can span subject areas too and talk about percentages and things like that. So it's got many applications. Okay, I'd also like to mention you can download our lesson plans for free. So currently we have 12 lesson plans online. You can download quite a few. I think we're writing 3 more that you can download shortly. And even if it says grade 7 geography, for example, you can adjust the material. It's not specifically for grade 7 geography. You can adjust it. It's we just need some curriculum links to use. And Marcy said that the profile section will be updated using the 2016 census data. So that's wonderful because it will be a little more current as well, and you can talk about that in your classes. So this is an example of one of the lesson plans using the Neptis Geoweb, and you can go online and download this for free. And just a couple of final thoughts. Thank you again for joining us today. And I'd like you to just keep in mind that the Neptis Geoweb, it's really a tool that's very accessible. It's nice because you don't have to waste any time with logins. You can use it right away, and it's very user-friendly too. And as I mentioned earlier, I find that students discover features all the time that I myself haven't yet figured out. For example, I was in a classroom recently, and students were putting emojis onto their map that they created, and it was a feature I didn't even know existed. So that was really unique, and again, a fun way to engage students and really make it personal. But you can look at all kinds of things like land use, natural resources, transportation, population, and municipal data too. So you can download all of our lesson plans as well as the teacher resource guide, and we will be recording this, so we will post it online, and we'll send you the link once we've done that, along with the PowerPoint presentation slides. We have one final webinar, and that's on building complete communities for the future, and that one is hosted with Green Teacher, and it's next week on Monday, March 5th. So you're welcome to join us for that. The registration goes through Green Teacher though, so it might be slightly different than the registration you did for this one. And just a little bit of food for thought. You don't have to answer these questions, but just something to think about. How can you use the Neptis Geoweb in your classroom? And then how can you use it in your own personal life as well? There's many applications that aren't specific to the classroom. They're a little, it does definitely have some relevant applications to your own life as well. So feel free to think about how those can impact your life. Okay, and I'd like to thank Marcy from the Neptis Foundation for joining us today. Her information is very valuable, as well as the province of Ontario for their support. And finally, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's wonderful having you with us, whether it's the first webinar that you're joining us for, or if you've attended all 3 so far. There is a webinar evaluation that we'd love for you to complete, surveymonkey.com/r/completecommunities3. And if you go to that website, you can complete our SurveyMonkey webinar, and that would be a webinar evaluation. That's really helpful for us so that we can include those. I'm hoping that someone else can post in there just so I can show you the resource. If you complete a webinar evaluation, we're doing a draw for the webinar evaluation. So everyone that completes one, we'll do a draw, and one participant will receive this Geography of the Greenbelt resource guide. So you can grab this. And thank you, Joyce, for posting the link. Appreciate that. So you can go to the webinar link right there and complete the webinar, and then we will, if you submit your email address, we will choose one participant who will win this resource guide. So we appreciate all your thoughts, your comments, and suggestions for the future too. And then finally, if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them right now. So you can just, I think I missed a question earlier that I saw. So I think the question was, what grades would the Neptis Geoweb work best for? So I think that it would definitely work really well for many grades. For example, geography, for science. I'd say that a lot of the lesson plans we've created so far are for grade 6 up to high school, but I think that it's very flexible. We've had grade 2 teachers that have used this program in their classes, and they've modeled the program a little bit more. So instead of having their students do it, they show their students the different types of land use or their community. So it's just a matter of changing how you use the material and maybe modeling it instead of having your students use it. But we've done, we've had students in elementary school using this program all the way up to high school, and they've all really enjoyed it. So I think it's very accessible for many grades. And it's really just a matter of adjusting the material for your students, and also based on what you're looking to teach. So it's very flexible in that sense. Oh, Jennifer, oh, you're welcome. Good. I hope I answered your question. Great. Val said, thanks, Kathleen. Great variety of info. Oh, Neptis Geoweb will be helpful. Oh, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. That's wonderful. If you have any other questions, just let us know. I think Marcy will stick around for another minute or so as well, and she can show us some additional information. So if you are interested in sticking around and learning a little bit more about some of the other features in the Geoweb and some of the data that will be added shortly, she will do that. Okay. All right. So I think that Sammy said, thanks, I learned more than I did last time at the conference. Oh, wonderful. That's great. Thank you, Samia. It's great to have you with us again. And I know the conferences are often very pressed for time to squeeze everything into 1 hour, and you have a lot of material to teach. So I hope I've given you at least a little bit more of a background and some classroom ideas too. As I mentioned, I will make the slides available online afterwards, and we'll send you a link afterwards so that you can use those and get some of the classroom ideas. You can also download the lesson plans, and there's quite a few lesson plans that talk about the Neptis Geoweb and how to use those in your classroom. Awesome, great, current database, oh good. And again, as Marcy mentioned, they will be adding additional data from the 2016 census, which is wonderful because then you can talk about census data as well, which is also in the curriculum, and you can make these connections to your own classroom and look at your own communities that way. Lizette said, very easy to use, no need to log in, which is great. Oh, perfect. We've heard that comment quite a lot, that logins take a lot of time, and it's really nice that you don't need to log in here. It's wonderful. If you have any other questions, that's great. I might flip it over to Marcy now, who can answer a couple other questions and maybe show you some additional features. So Marcy, I'm just going to, if you give me 1 second, just going to figure out how to add Marcy here as a host. So, so just give me 1 second. It just takes a minute. Sorry, just looking for Marcy's name. Okay. All right. So, let's see. I'm actually going to make Marcy a host right now so that she can include some, provide you with some additional information. All right. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Yes, we can hear you, Marcy.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
So Marcy's a host now, and we'll let her show a few additional features.
So thanks, Kathleen. That was a great overview of the Neptis Geoweb. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys can use, all the tools, and again, give us as much feedback as possible. And we will continue as we continue to develop this tool. I'm just going to show you the profiles because this is still under development. But we partnered with an organization who was really interested in more census data on both demographics, labor force, and employment, and then some characteristics about our population. So we were able to add sort of twice the amount of profiles, data sets that we used that Kathleen showed in this demo. And so what I'm going to show you now is just sort of a mock-up of what we have so far. So we still have these categories on the side. You'll see here land use, demographics, housing. We've added languages, economy, and transportation. And the new feature that we have for demographics is we have sort of the same kind of yearly totals where it shows the absolute value of population change over time. But
Oh,
then we have
sorry,
another.
sorry, Marcy. Just
Yeah.
to interrupt you for a second, we can't actually see your screen right now. Are you able to
Oh,
share
you
your
can?
screen?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Did I not accept? Did you share?
So
Oh,
I've made you a host.
okay.
You
Share
should be able to share
screen.
your screen.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I
Great.
didn't do much in terms of the sharing. So this window is sort of in the way. See if I can. Okay, never mind. Do you see the profiles page, or do you see the profiles
Yes,
page
we
with a
see the
big
demographics right
black
now.
box? Okay, great. Okay, so the one thing that, so I have some friends who are in university, and one of the things that that they teach very early on in university is sort of calculating percentage change. And so the original Geoweb had these yearly totals essentially that showed change over time, just in the totals. So, for example, 5.5 million people in the GTA in 2001, and it grows to 6.9 in 2016. But we also have a bar you can toggle to show the percentage change. So what's the rate of change essentially, which is kind of an interesting mathematical feature to discuss with students that I think would be very helpful. We also have more in the age breakdown as well. So we have children age group, working age groups, and then 65 and over seniors age group. And then we have a toggle button that breaks up age groups in a different way, really in sort of generations. So you can talk about sort of the millennial generation between 15 and 30. And then again, you can toggle over these and it'll show you what the breakdown is. Immigrant status is another one that we've added, and then some information about gender and gender breakdown by age. You could show that in different communities. The one that I'm showing here is actually for the GTA and Hamilton area. So that's why the numbers are quite larger. Educational attainment. So your communities, what's the educational attainment in different communities? And this is the one that Kathleen was talking about that we added. So we have sort of 4 kind of language groups: English speakers, percent speakers of French, and percent Aboriginals. And unfortunately, it seems the profiles that I've looked at, the percentage of Aboriginal speakers are so small that sometimes they don't show up. But with this launch, the mapping tool will also have a number of these data sets you'll be able to map. So right now on the Geoweb, you can only map in the context layers, the population, the employment, some of the transportation behaviors, but you will also be able to map things like the different languages that are language groups in the GTA, as well as some of the educational attainment and a number of other variables on the site as well. And then in the profiles, we've added, this is kind of interesting too, the top 10 immigrant languages that are spoken in a particular community, which I think is also kind of fun to understand, what is the predominant languages that are spoken in a particular community. We've added more housing variables. Again, we've added that, total change over time and also percent change over time. More on kind of a little bit more on housing in terms of the cost of housing in a particular community and how many household community spend more than 30% of their total income on housing, essentially. And that's kind of an indicator of when you spend more than 30% of your total income on housing, that raises a household sort of stress level as well. So we have a little bit more on households, a bit more on income brackets and dwelling types, and then a lot more on the economy that I won't really go into because some of this data is not quite sort of what we call dummy data, because it's not quite ready for prime time. But you see that we've actually doubled the amount of I would call them variables or census data sets that are in the profiles. And then we're adding, I believe, 17 new data sets in the context layers so that you can map some of the census information as well. So I'll sort of leave it at that, unless anyone has any questions.
Well, that's great. Okay, so thank you so much, Marcy, for showing all that. So that's additional data that will be available, I believe, in April, which is great. And again, a lot of options that you can use those for with your students. And I'm just trying to keep up with the chat here. There have been a couple questions, and Marcy, you might be the best one to answer this. Just about the map. So if we're in the map and we have the legend box, that kind of stays in the far left corner. That's right.
Yeah, it does. You can't drag the
Just
legend around. You can just close it or open it.
Okay, great. And there's another question here just about, Lizette said that the data sets that will be added are really interesting. So that was something that she wrote. And I'm just trying to, again, keep up with the chat here. Some of these are private messages, so it's a little hard to read them all. So that she was looking around and found something had to do with reducing the carbon footprint option when traveling. I'm not exactly certain if I know quite what you're talking about, but if you look under transportation, you can look at commuting patterns. You can also look at specific transportation routes as well. I think that you should be able to look at the map, so that should be under the map, and then you can look at the legend there. Lizette, I hope I answered your question. If not, feel free to let me know. And I'd also like to mention as well that what you can do is, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email address is kathleen@ecospark.ca. I'm sure Marcy will also be happy to answer emails too if you have questions.